The name sat quietly near the bottom of the stack. When Preston Langley, Vice President of Talent Operations at Wentworth Capital, read it aloud in the boardroom, he didn't read it with curiosity scoffed. "This one doesn't belong here," he said, loud enough for the room to hear, grinning like a man performing for an invisible audience. The laughter that followed wasn't spontaneous, it was encouraged, a subtle cue passed between colleagues who knew when to smile and when to remain still. He wasn't laughing because the resume was unimpressive. It was the skin tone, the background, the idea that someone like him thought he could walk into this room, into their room, and belong. Preston didn't even wait for the handshake to end before he told HR to toss the application. He saw no pedigree, no Harvard or Dartmouth, no familiar last name from any country club or mutual fund dinner. We didn't see what no one in that room could see was that the man they tried to humiliate held a quiet and devastating power. This wasn't a story about arrogance. It was a case study in short-sightedness, in the kind of failure that comes not from incompetence, but from misjudging stillness for weakness. It began on a Monday morning as the Manhattan skyline shimmered in the pale blue light of early spring. Preston sat in his corner office, leather chair angled slightly toward the city, tumbler of whiskey in hand despite the early hour. His desk was immaculate. A folder sat unopened in front of him, labeled Executive Finalist Pool. He hadn't touched it until his assistant, Gina, sent him a reminder. Begrudgingly, he flipped it open and started thumbing through it. The names were what he expected, polished, proven, pedigreed. Then he saw it, Marlon D. Freeman. The name made him laugh. Out loud. He read through the resume like he was reading a bad joke. State school in Illinois. Experience in 2 mid-level startups. A few solid numbers. No legacy. Preston turned to Gina. "This one's from HR's latest diversity push," he said. "Freeman. Probably parked my car once." Gina, composed as ever, didn't respond. She simply confirmed that Marlon's metrics were exceptional and that he'd been recommended by the executive committee for final review. Preston smirked. "Optics," he muttered. "Window dressing." At 10 sharp, Marlon arrived. He stepped in with calm, unhurried precision. His charcoal gray suit was clean and tailored. His presence was grounded, not flashy, not aggressive, just assured. He extended a hand. Preston took it without offering a real grip, then reached for a silk cloth to wipe his palm, as though Marlon had left something behind. He didn't even look back. Marlon noticed, but didn't blink. The interview began not with questions, but with a monologue. Preston talked for 7 straight minutes about Wentworth's portfolio, its international reach, its values, everything he could rattle off without actually engaging. Then he finally leaned in, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "So, Mr. Freeman, why do you think someone with your background is ready for this kind of table?" Marlon didn't flinch. He responded with specifics. 73% employee growth in under 3 years, a product launch that outpaced expectations by 30%, a $9 million exit without VC backing. His answers were clear, composed, and unapologetically fact-based. Preston cut him off repeatedly, pretending to check his tablet. At one point, he asked if Marlon knew anyone on the board. Because, he said, success is more about who knows you than what you know. Marlon replied evenly, "Results should speak louder than legacy." Preston blinked, then changed the subject. He didn't hide his disinterest. He didn't have to. Sitting alongside him were 2 other executives, Mary Ann from operations and Stewart from legal. Mary Ann had marked up Marlon's turnaround case study and made quiet notes of approval. Stewart had remarked, "There's real strategy here." But Preston had made up his mind. This wasn't about merit. It was about maintenance. The system needed to look right, feel right. Marlon didn't. The second-round panel was more formal. Again, Marlon arrived precisely on time. Crisp blue suit, black tie, calm in every step. He greeted each interviewer with dignity. Preston nodded coldly, already preparing the rejection email in his head. When Marlon presented a detailed, well-researched analysis of market integration strategy referencing Wentworth's own financials, Preston raised his hand to interrupt with a chuckle. "Have you ever fixed a copier during a crisis?" he asked. "Or served coffee when the receptionist called out sick?" Everyone in the room caught the insult. Marianne stiffened. Stewart stopped writing. Marlin didn't flinch. He simply transitioned to a case study about managing a 12-state system outage during peak retail season. No client loss. No theatrics. Just performance under pressure. But Preston kept pushing. Ever worked outside urban markets? Somewhere. Less familiar. You ever taken a humility seminar? The questions were dressed in humor, but soaked in bias. When the session ended, Marlin stood, thanked everyone, and walked out with the same steady composure. Preston chuckled, threw Marlin's folder to the side of the table, and said, "Honestly, he'd be better in logistics or warehouse ops. He's got energy, but no instinct for boardrooms." No one spoke. In the hallway, Marlin passed a junior analyst who gave him a nod. Marlin nodded back, entered the elevator, and stared at the doors as they closed. He wasn't angry, just observant. Back upstairs, Preston texted his usual group of department heads. Not a culture fit. Smart but off-brand. No follow-up needed. He crumpled Marlin's resume and missed the trash bin. Then he kicked it in with a smug, "There we go." The next morning, Preston met privately with the hiring council. He didn't even mention Marlin's name. Instead, he endorsed another Candide Yale graduate whose father had once vacationed with his. When Marianne tried to bring up Marlin's performance, Preston dismissed it with a wave. "Potential," he said, "but not for us." Marlin's profile disappeared. Quietly. No write-up, no notation, just a no longer under review. Later that week, Preston hosted one of his infamous casual working lunches, attended by his chosen lieutenants. These weren't strategy meetings. They were reinforcement rituals, a reminder of who belonged. Between bites of seared salmon, Preston recounted Marlin's interview with mockery, turning his answers into punchlines. "Great storyteller," he joked. "TED Talk level." But nothing real. The laughter was awkward, but it came. Preston delivered the gut punch with a smirk. They always show up with demands. But when it's time to deliver, they vanish. At the far end of the table, a young analyst named Noah shifted in his seat. He was new, progressive, thoughtful, quietly ambitious, and he couldn't let it pass. "I don't think that's a fair assessment," Noah said. He was qualified. He didn't ask for anything except to be heard. The room froze. Preston turned, amused. "You knew," he said softly. "So let me explain. Here, we measure loyalty. Notre juste résumé." The table moved on, but Noah had marked himself. His name was quietly taken off a fast-track list the next week. What Preston didn't notice was the quiet change starting to ripple through the office. Whispered Slack threads, side conversations, doubts. A few days later, Marlin received an anonymous email. It included details from the lunch, paraphrased but clear. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. It confirmed what he already knew. The gate wasn't built to measure merit. It was built to filter it out. And then things shifted. Whispers about an acquisition became louder. Rumors grew. Preston, who had spent years guarding the firm's gates, suddenly found himself on alert. During a meeting, he joked that he hoped the buyers weren't from the South Side, and everyone in the room knew it wasn't about geography. He ordered an internal optics review, had HR quietly move employees to off-site placements if they didn't fit the image. He changed the artwork in the lobby grayscale portraits, replacing vibrant color. He used phrases like executive impression management. He didn't say it out loud. He didn't have to. The day of the announcement arrived with little fanfare. A simple calendar entry, strategic alignment briefing. Preston sat front row, composed, dressed, armored. Gina stood off to the side, clipboard in hand, watching everything. When the new owner was introduced, no one recognized the holding company's name. But when the doors opened and Marlin Freeman walked onto the stage in a midnight black suit, the silence cracked. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He placed a single folder on the podium and said only, "Let's begin." The documents confirmed the acquisition. Marlin was now the majority owner. The man dismissed without thought now on the room. He didn't rant. He simply recounted. 11 years ago, he had worked at Wentworth. As a software engineer, built systems that saved the firm millions. Never promoted. never invited to strategize. So he left, built his own firm, sold it, grew again, and then came back not for revenge, but to assess. He had given them a test. They had failed. The cultural reset was swift. Multiple senior leaders were removed, Preston among them. A simple white envelope. Irrevocable termination. He didn't argue. He couldn't. A new ethics committee was formed. Hiring audits were launched. A digital archive appeared on the internal portal. Redacted files. Interview transcripts. A copy of the email Preston had once sent mocking Marlin's resume, emoji, and all. One analyst was promoted. Another joined the new compliance team. And slowly, the culture changed. Months later, Marlin gave a keynote at the Urban Equity Futures Summit. The invitation was sent to Preston. He came, quietly. When the mic passed to him during Q&A, he stood. "I used to think power meant being above question," he said. "But I've learned that sometimes falling isn't punishment. It's the only way to see the ground." Marlin didn't praise him. He just nodded. And that was enough.